Hello and welcome to InvertiCast. I'm Nat, and today we're joined by Leah from Tarantula Leah's, and Logan is going to join us shortly, hopefully. How you doing, Leah?
I'm great. How are you, Nat?
Do you know what? I'm not too bad actually. Big day, as I was saying to you off screen when we were. It's been the Western Invert Show, one of the biggest invert shows apart from BTS in the UK.
Yeah.
And it was intense. It
Oh, I
was
can
hot,
imagine.
sticky. Everyone had like beads of sweat coming from their heads. No one could get to any tables. But it was great. Um,
Awesome.
so just sort of recovering from that at the moment. But
Wonderful.
yeah, they had lots of soil there, Leah, and I think that's what we're going to be talking about today, isn't it? Substrate and
Yes, substrate and just kind of how we do our enclosures or
and
how
just
we
sort
how we make them.
sort of like an open discussion, really, isn't it? Like
Yeah,
I wouldn't say this is a definitive how-to guide,
certainly not.
because um, things change constantly, as we know within the hobby. But
Oh yeah,
yeah, I think it's a really interesting topic.
it
Um,
is. I agree. I totally agree. Because well, you do your substrate and your enclosures with a bioactive. So usually
well,
you have live
It's
plants.
it's it's semi-bioactive. I wouldn't say it's fully bioactive. And if we think about the podcast from last week when we were
Yeah,
speaking to Brian
right,
from Rubber Ducky Isopods, he was talking really bioactive on the submicroscopic level,
right.
whereas I think mine they look bioactive, but they do have live plants in them. Yeah,
That's good.
I would say that I stay away from isopods within my mix and other sort of live things, but I do put springtails in.
Oh, that's
Um,
always good. Yes.
what about you? What's yours? Are you a bioactiver or what do you
Actually,
do?
no. I'm more naturalistic, but I'm basically like mimicking nature. So I do have kind of like the little synthetic plants and stuff that I buy
Hmm.
at craft stores. And then I've been doing little magnets on the leaves and stuff so that I can just
I've
place them on.
I've seen
And
they look amazing. It's like
oh, thank you.
an amazing little hack there, really.
Yeah, and it works really well because, if the tarantula decides to tear apart the enclosure or tear apart the leaves and whatnot, they can still be used later, in like another enclosure or something. So I am not bioactive, but I will occasionally throw springtails into enclosures, if it seems to be getting kind of mildewy or, it's like too moist. Then those little gnats kind of show up. So then I will throw the springtails or a couple isopods in there just to keep everything kind of balanced.
Hmm.
Um, so I'm kind of maybe I'm half and half.
Yeah. So what are you using? So we could actually start on what is actually available, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So, cocoa fiber,
Right.
that I think everyone really starts with cocoa fiber, don't they? Or is it core? People call it core as well. Is that right? No, that's not the right pronunciation. But
Maybe. I don't I
it's
know
like,
that I use there's actually quite a few substrates out there. So there's like a few from like Zilla and uh what's the reptile one? It's called reptile, something reptile. I don't know. It's Exoterra. That's the one I'm thinking
oh,
of.
the exoterra substrates. Yeah,
Yeah. And Zilla substrates. And then of course there's BioDude, who
yeah.
I'm kind of a fan of BioDude. He's got some good stuff. Um, but yeah, there's quite a few. And I actually even know people who will get like potting soil
Yeah.
without the pesticides. So you can get potting soil without pesticides, and
Oh,
they'll
so
use that.
the organic
Hmm.
compost and topping soil and
Yeah.
different things. So, what do you use? What is your go to at the
Actually,
moment?
at the moment, my go-to is Zilla. jungle mix substrate. So
Mhm.
it's called jungle mix. I don't really know what that means, but I know that there's little bits of sphagnum moss and kind of charcoal and just kinds of things that like add texture to the substrate rather than it just being dirt or, like cocoa fiber. Um, and then
Yeah, so it'll have like twigs and different detritus in it, like to
yes,
break down. Yeah. Right.
yes, absolutely. So they're really great, really substantial for those, for isopods and that bioactive enclosures. I just don't plant plants.
So do you, I think with that substrate you can actually plant live plants into it, can't you?
Yes, I
Um,
believe so.
I think I think it's recommended to maybe put a potting compost below it, so like a sub layer,
Mm,
and then having that on top, so it's got some areas to root into. Um,
awesome.
well, when we if we go back to cocoa fiber, so
Yeah,
everyone kind of starts off at cocoa fiber in the hobby.
yes,
I definitely did. I am trying to quit. I go to a cocoa fiber monthly group, and we all
sure.
stand around saying that we've given up cocoa fiber and we're now bioactive. And no, I joke. Um, cocoa fiber, it's cheap. I
It
don't know
is.
if you find it's a quite a cheap
It is.
substrate to get.
I agree. I do think that is very cost effective. The only issue with it is that it is only cocoa fiber.
Yeah.
Um, for me, that's kind of a pitfall. Like I would
Mhm.
rather mix that in with something else
Yeah.
to give it that texture like it would have in nature. Because, um, obviously habitats, they're all going to range a little bit, but they all will have, some leaf litter and little bits of wood or little bits of, moss and stuff like that. Like dirt isn't just one
Yeah.
thing. Um,
Do you think the spider knows this though?
I think that no, I don't think
No,
they really
no,
do. I don't.
I don't think they do.
I'm not sure
I
they care.
I think with cocoa fiber, it's definitely a really good place to start. And as some of our listeners have said, using it for things if you're raising slings,
Hmm.
if you're um, if you're doing quick changes between.
Hmm.
Some people will keep a tarantula. Let's talk about tarantulas because that's what me and you are comfortable with.
Absolutely.
They will start off on a sling pot and then go straight to the adult enclosure because they want to reduce that. So you might be thinking you go from cocoa fiber over to whatever substrate you use. I would
Right.
also say that there's like some really big influencers um, within the community, aren't there? So if you're thinking
Oh yeah.
about Petco, Tom Moran,
Right.
um, Richard from the Tarantula Collective.
Hmm.
If you look at their older videos,
Hmm.
they use cocoa fiber.
They do. They use cocoa fiber.
It has a place. One really good thing that I like about cocoa fiber is that it's light.
Yeah, I do
So
like that too.
when we thinking about like moving our enclosures, we go and do feeding. Some people may not be able to do feeding on the shelf.
Mm.
you, like my dream would be have to have something like Petco's got a nice setup. Um,
Petco's got the dream when it
yeah,
comes when it comes to a critter
yeah,
room or
yeah,
he's got the a really great setup. I
yeah,
agree. Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
love his shelvings and
But one of the main issues, and it has been touched on, is that cocoa fiber dries out really fast.
mm,
So it does dry out really fast, and um, if you're keeping a humid dependent tarantula, let's say,
hmm.
it's another job on top of the many other jobs that we have when we keep spiders. There's
Oh, of course.
also the thing that I've come across quite a lot um, is about how it compacts.
Mm,
So we want to make sure, especially because let's say, for instance, tarantulas are quite fragile. So if they fall, you will fluff up your cocoa fiber, put it into the enclosure, the 5 gallon, 10 gallon, whatever exoterra you've got,
hmm.
and over time it will slowly shrink and compact,
Yes,
and so that's increasing that height. But
right.
it's very versatile. It can be used. Spiders, tarantulas will use it
Oh yeah.
for they can web, they can tunnel in it.
Hmm.
So, and when you lots of people aren't aware of this, but when you look like you're taking one of those enclosures apart, you'll get a tube of silk come out, and it'll be what's supporting that cocoa fiber, so they can have that. So it definitely has that, but benefits are as well is that it doesn't mold easy. It does mold, but
It
it doesn't
molds,
mold
but not.
not very
Yeah,
easy. It's definitely something because it's not so full of bioactiveness, I suppose.
true. I agree. Um, well, and that's actually one of the reasons that I use the Zilla Jungle Mix is because I have found that it's relatively light. It's
Hmm.
similar to cocoa fiber, um, but it also allows for those burrows and it keeps moisture a little better than the cocoa fiber does.
Hmm.
And for me, that's kind of a huge issue just because I live here in Colorado. We're at high altitude, so the air up here is a lot thinner, um, which means that moisture is just sucked right out of the air really quickly. So for my moisture dependent tarantulas, I don't, like I said, don't like to use cocoa fiber a whole lot just because of that moisture side of everything. So with what I use, it keeps moisture really well. Like, let me see if I can find. So this is my Trinidad pink. It's the Cereocosmus longipes.
Yep.
And you can see that there's like a layer that has just maintained that moisture
Yeah.
because this is, another tarantula that definitely depends on that moisture. So that's another reason I really like this is because I can see just how much humidity or how much moisture is still in there.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so it makes sense to me for that.
Yeah.
But I do like
Yeah.
cocoa fiber. I do think it's light. If a tarantula's burrow like caves in somehow or like just kind of crumbles down, the cocoa fiber it's not going to hurt the tarantula as badly,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
I think also a negative with it as well is positive. First
mm,
of all, let's go with a positive. It's really easy to store because it comes in those little pucks
the
or
the pack of
the bricks and things.
yeah,
The flip side of that, though, the negative is the preparation time.
right.
So if you have
You
to
gotta
soak it, and you're not going to want to put freshly soaked cocoa fiber into an enclosure.
no,
You want to leave it for a day or so to evaporate off a little bit. So that's I would
absolutely.
say that's kind of another negative. But
Hmm.
as we're talking about substrate,
Hmm.
I think we've definitely come on leaps and bounds, especially I would say over the last 10 years,
Oh,
com-
absolutely.
compared to maybe how we were keeping inverts before. So
Hmm.
there's definitely something to be said that back in the day, and
Hmm.
it's so back in the day, and not saying that it's wrong, um, but how tarantulas used to be kept on vermiculite. I know there's probably
Vermiculite.
people listening to this that probably still keep their tarantulas on vermiculite.
I'm sure
Um,
vermiculite is still very useful for a lot of, invert keepers and stuff.
yeah,
I have never used it personally,
no,
so I really don't know. Sorry.
no. I was listening. I was agreeing with you.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I haven't used it, but I do know that vermiculite, the reason that they did use it was because it was really great at maintaining that moisture.
Hmm.
As far as I know, like that's kind of why a lot of people really liked it, and that was just kind of the go-to thing, you know, 10, 15 years ago.
And then also orc bark chippings. There we go. I
Hmm.
got that out. Orc bark chippings. You'll see people that still keep um their spiders on that. And well, one we need to try and understand is why that is. And I think um going back 10 years ago, you didn't have such brilliant tarantula dealers about back then.
Hmm.
So you would go to your local pet shop that will keep OBT, let's say, just for argument's sake, on
Sure.
orchid bark chippings. The reason why they're doing that is because they want the spider to be out and be visible.
Hmm. Yeah.
Um, so, but you learn through visual things, and if that's how the pet shop keeps it, that's how you're going to keep it. And
Right.
we could then go into like red light bulbs and things, but we won't talk about that today.
No, don't worry.
Um, but you will, and it's in a lot of the literature and a lot of YouTube videos, old YouTube videos. You might
Hmm.
get a YouTube video that's got, let's say, 1 million views, but it's been out for 10 years. So we
Right.
need to
Yeah.
really think about that math side of things, that it's going to have more views.
Hmm.
Um, it's going to be there. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's correct. Um,
Well, and that's one thing that I really like about our hobby, and that's what makes this podcast so wonderful, is that we're always changing, we're always learning,
yeah,
we're, developing new skills, we're seeing things that weren't working before, and we tweak and peak, as they say, and fix it and make it work better. And so, yeah, I agree. Like some videos from, 5, 10 years ago are not always going to be the best information like for now.
no, no, and that translates over to loads of stuff, doesn't it, within the
Yeah, it
within the
does.
real world? So,
Absolutely.
um, but talking about the vermiculite side of things,
Mm,
I've been informed recently. I can't remember who it. I think it might have been through Tarantula Ramblings.
okay.
We were talking about vermiculite and substrate, and talking about mold and
Mm,
different outbreaks. Because also mold is like a really fearful thing. It's not nice to look at.
no, certainly not.
You're worried if it's going to affect your spider in some way.
Right.
There is definitely a concern of that.
Well, I do believe that it does. I think mold actually can attract those parasites that we
Yeah.
really don't want coming into our enclosures and getting to those
Mhm.
tarantulas because, mites is one thing. We can do something about mites,
Yeah.
but when we're talking about like nematodes or, that kind of parasite where there's nothing you could do about it and it's the worst.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So
so
vermiculite can. So what Tarantula Ramblings was telling me the other week is
uh,
that it reduces mold outbreaks within the substrate, which I really want to go and start looking into. I was thinking of
yeah.
doing a side by side experiment, having two empty enclosures, same soil, but one of them
Mhm.
having vermiculite in and one of them not, and just topping them up with water and seeing which one, if any, um,
Molds up.
molds up first,
Yeah.
and just sort of like having a look at that. I think when when we think about substrates and things, I think that's like a really important thing as well. Is about think about like what works for you, right?
Right. Right.
And what's available. So peat moss. Do you use peat moss in the states?
I do believe we do. I think that we do have some peat moss. I'm a big fan of sphagnum moss or
Hmm.
the New Zealand sphagnum moss.
Yeah.
And I don't believe I've used peat moss.
So peat moss isn't actually a moss. It is like a soil.
Oh, right.
What we call it peat moss.
Okay.
I'm just googling it a second.
I think it's actually part of the mix that I use in the jungle
Yeah,
mix. I think that there is a little bit of peat moss in the.
yeah. I know within the UK they are trying to reduce the use of peat moss
Mhm.
um, due to where it's farmed from. So from the
Oh,
peat bogs and how it's impacting on the uh, natural ecosphere as such in that area.
oh. See, I didn't know that.
Mm,
Thank you for informing
yeah.
me.
Um, but talk about smagnum moss. Oh, you say it, Leah. Say it for me.
Which one?
Smag. the smag
Sphagnum moss.
smag. There we go. Yeah, thank you. Oh, I'm so tired. But talking about that it's a really good resource to use.
Absolutely.
Just when we think
Yes.
about humidity
Right.
and creating those humid pockets within the substrate, and they can,
Definitely.
and that can be used for within all sorts of inverts. So when we're thinking about millipedes and
Hmm.
isopods, burrowing beetles,
Oh,
everything,
sure.
it's such a good way to keep the soil active. I suppose is the only way
Absolutely.
to
Yeah,
put it.
I agree. I really like sphagnum moss. I feel like it really holds that moisture. Like, again, I'm all about that, keeping the moisture in. Um, and it also kind of makes the enclosure, like if you put it in just on its own, it actually looks really great.
Yeah,
It looks
yeah,
very natural.
it does. Do you get colored? Do you get dyed moss where you are,
Uh,
or is it natural?
I think most of it is very natural. We do get this green, like grassy type moss stuff,
Yeah,
that is really nice, but it's green. So I would assume that's probably the natural color of it. Um, but as far as dyed stuff, I haven't seen any dyed stuff.
mhm,
And I'm not
yeah.
sure that would be super beneficial anyhow.
No, I know that
It's-
some so out of the invert world, but more in the reptile world, they do
Sure.
have lots of like dyed
Oh yeah,
moss for the enclosures and say things. And I've heard stories of how the dyed moss, if the animals eat it, they can take on the color. Not inverts, but
sure.
reptiles,
Like reptiles. Yeah,
because of the dyes in it. But that's a really good way to keep that moisture level up for sure. Is
absolutely.
like
Yeah.
mixing that in there. Um, what about any of your arid tarantulas? Do you reckon it's all right to keep your arid tarantulas on sand? Let's say.
Yes. Like kind of a mixture of the whatever substrate you use, so like the cocoa fiber, and then if you put a little sand in there, I think that's okay too.
Yeah,
Just keep a nice light mixture for it.
it's about actually having a mix, isn't it? It is.
Yes.
I don't think they're. So if we were to think about like the six-eyed sand spider, yes, that
Absolutely.
that's sand. And
Yeah. You
if we
definitely
were,
want,
yeah,
sorry, I
no, no, no,
apologize. You
no.
you
Carry on.
definitely want sand to be the primary substrate for that invert for sure. Like
Yeah,
any invert that is, from a desert or like uses the sand for some purpose, then you're definitely going to want that sand. But for most tarantulas and in my experience, the sand is not great all on its own for
no,
tarantulas because it can
no,
actually be really abrasive to their arms and their legs and their bodies, basically,
yeah,
their exoskeletons. So
yeah.
mixing it in is always good, but
And if we say, for instance, if we look at the Aphonopalma chalcodes,
mhm,
they don't nest in a sand dune as such. Or I know they come from a very arid space, but you'll find their burrows in the root systems of plants and trees
yes,
where there's a bit more substance in it, and it's not sand.
uh-huh, yeah,
When we're thinking about that, but if you were to be if you were to be keeping your inverts on a, let's say, a arid substrate, what's your go-to, Leah?
for an arid substrate, definitely. See, again, I would go with the jungle mix, but I would definitely mix a little bit of sand in that.
Yeah.
And probably some we have like little wood chip type things or like I believe what are they called? Cypress mulch. If you take a little bit of the cypress mulch and
Hmm.
and put that in the substrate, that also makes for a really nice, like arid kind of feeling substrate.
Hmm.
And it works really well for the tarantulas because again, it adds that texture and then it's not only like the sand and the substrate, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, no, that makes total sense, and I think it's about having those like bits of detritus in there and stuff, especially for. for animals that are creating a den and
Yes. Yes.
and doing stuff. I suppose if we were to be thinking about, let's think about mantis. Substrate's not
Yes.
really important for them, is it?
Uh, I think it can be, but no, not really. They like to hang out on leaves and
Yeah,
branches and whatnot.
absolutely. I think the if I was to be thinking about substrate within my enclosures for my mantis, even though mine's like free roaming somewhere in the flat. I'm not sure where he is at the moment, but he's definitely around somewhere.
That's great.
Yeah, every now and again I'll be looking for him, and I'll just be like, "Where is he?" And it clicks, and he will be where the I keep all my live food, and he'll be
Mm.
like on the side of the container. I'm like, "Okay, so you're hungry, right? Let's sort that out." Um, I find keeping substrate in with my mantis like really important. So I put a
Yes.
good inch or so at the bottom, cover it with moss, and
Mm.
it helps that humidity again. As
Yes.
I think one of the really good things about one of the really important things, not one of the good things, one of the really important things about substrate is that it holds that humidity.
Right.
Even if we have a dry and arid, or what we would say from the Aphonopelma family,
Right.
they come from quite an arid climate,
Hmm.
but they will burrow, and they're burrowing because they're trying to find that moisture, that
Yes.
they're
Yep.
trying to regulate and find that spot. Um, Not so much with the Balfouri,
Right.
um, the Sulcata or Island Blue baboon tarantula,
Hmm.
but within their web castle, let's say
Hmm.
if we're keeping a communal one, they once again they do have like there's little pockets of humidity in there as well. So,
Most certainly. Yep.
uh, but I think what I find sometimes is when you maybe maybe first think about an arid species, you suddenly think, right, no moisture, sand,
Right.
dry. When
Sahara
actually,
Desert.
yeah, Sahara Desert, like or Death Valley, what
Death
the
Valley.
hardest.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, like it will survive there. Well, actually, I think we really need to think about adding that humidity because there are spikes in areas, and um,
Definitely.
you get humidity in the morning, don't you, with the
Oh,
morning dew and stuff. So
certainly. Like the southeast region of the United States is actually kind of crazy because it
mhm,
goes from one extreme to another um, throughout the day cycle. So, like you were saying with Death Valley, it can get up to what 112 or so degrees in the daytime in the summer, and then it'll drop down to 40, 50 in the evenings
yeah,
in the nighttime. So, yeah, definitely there is moisture in these areas. And it does, I agree with you that the tarantulas will burrow and they're seeking out that moisture. They're
yeah,
seeking out like a cooler spot because, you and I both know we don't want our tarantulas in direct sunlight because it really
yeah,
it fries them, Um, so when they burrow, that's essentially what they're doing is they're
mhm,
absolutely searching for that
yeah, yeah.
moisture. And so yeah,
They're
I think even for mantises, like you said, substrate can be very, very important for those humidity levels. Like the orchid mantis is a tropical species. They're from Malaysia, um, or yeah, they're from Malaysia. So they need a lot of humidity. They need about 70 to 80% humidity.
mhm,
Um, so and that's how you achieve it is through your substrate. So I think it's really important to talk about the best methods of mixing your substrate and what to use for that. So it's good.
do you have like if you were to mix up your substrate, do you have a best method? You may have just walked into that by saying that.
I
Uh,
did, didn't I?
I
Usually
don't know
for
if you have anything like a certain recipe or anything that you use.
somewhat. I mean, I kind of go by what the invert needs. So like I said, if it's one of those high humidity, very moisture dependent species, then I'm going to use a little more of the jungle mix
Yeah,
than I would cocoa fiber or sand or anything like that. So I would use a lot more of that, and then um, probably a bit of cocoa fiber because it does help to keep that moisture in there. So I would mix
Mhm.
that pretty good. Maybe like about a 70-30 mix,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
But if we're talking about like the Monocentropus balfouri, um, then it would probably just be more of a like a 40-60 mix.
Yeah. So you'd be going a bit more dry
Hmm.
on that. I
Yeah.
would, I would definitely agree with you on that. The Balfour communal that I got recently,
Yeah.
I was trying to look into that, and I was thinking about getting um, the Arid Earth kit from Zoomed. Is it
Oh,
Zoomed? I
okay.
think it's Zoomed that do that, where you can effectively make tunnels and
Awesome.
stuff. Excavator clay, that's what I was looking for.
That's it. Yes.
And
I know
yeah,
Richard uses that and Petco and yeah.
yeah, they've all sort of like had a bash at that, haven't they? And
Yeah.
then over here, in the UK, I was discussing it with some of the other keepers,
Uh,
and I was recommended the Arcadia Arid Earth, which is a really
Oh,
nice substrate. However, when it arrived, it was quite moist, which I thought was quite surprising, seeing as it was meant to be Arid Earth.
yeah, that's
So
interesting.
with that as well, I just added some more sand to it, and as you say, it's about, I think you learn as you go along, don't you, about
Yes.
what's going to work for those uh, specific species. Not everything's going to work. You can't just have,
Right. Can't
well,
have one.
you can just have one kind of
Yeah.
substrate. You can.
Yeah.
Your invert, no matter what it is, might just survive and not thrive. Though
Right.
they might just do. And
Right. It would
if
be
we
like that bare minimum.
yeah,
Yeah.
it would like be going back to keeping them on vermiculite or just
Right.
orchid bark
Hmm.
or just pure sand. I can't remember which video it was, and I wouldn't name and shame anyway. But
No worries.
I remember seeing an old one where, keeping a Brachypalma humari on white sand
Oh, wow.
looked lovely, looked absolutely stunning.
Sure, it was
But
awesome.
that spider is not loving life. Um,
No. They
and
need that opportunity to even be able to burrow and with sand it's too heavy. Their burrows, cave in for them. It's just not so great.
no, no, and but that it might work if you're thinking about having something like a desert hairy scorpion or a June scorpion,
Hmm.
that kind of thing.
Hmm.
But even then, you're going to want to mix a little bit of cocoa core in
Definitely.
when you're doing that. Um, so yeah, have you got anything? Your last rehouse? What have you been
Oh,
doing? Because
yeah.
sort of on the substrate talk.
Okay. Actually, yeah, I just rehoused in my next video that I'll be releasing on my channel will be a Cereophagus levitum. So the cobalt blue tarantula. Um, and so the substrate that I used, this is a tarantula that comes from Thailand and
Hmm.
Myanmar. So that whole region is very, very moist. It's a tropical region, although they do have a couple of arid plateau
Hmm.
areas. So for mine, I used that jungle mix, like I said, and then I basically mixed in a little bit of wood chips and whatnot just to add that texture. But as far as the whole enclosure goes, that's pretty much all I did. I made nice deep substrate and a little beginner burrow, and she got in there good. Actually, this video is going to be really funny. I think you'll like it.
Good, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, it better be funny because you've said it's gonna be funny. So I'm going to
Took me
be
a while. It took
good.
me a
I'm looking.
while to get her into a new enclosure because well, she was very spicy when she finally came out, but she
Yeah,
hid so well from me. I had to actually dig her out. It really sucked, and I was nervous, and so
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, yeah. I've just, so what you said something actually quite poignant that
Oh,
um that I wanted to touch upon actually is you said about adding depth.
Yes.
So myself, I have just rehoused 3 fossorial tarantulas.
Oh yeah.
So I the Cancraken, 2 of them.
Oh,
I've rehoused, and sorry, I'm common names today. I'm generally common names anyway,
that's
but
okay.
you know,
The smoky earth
and
tiger, yeah?
yeah,
Yeah.
and the a Java Fury. Oh, that's going to bug me. It was something Java Penta. Anyway, it'll come to me.
No
Uh,
worries.
and for them, I actually use quite a wet
Oh,
mix. Not
absolutely.
not not sopping wet, but wet down one, like a damp mix and then wet down one corner.
Right.
But it goes back to the conversation we were when we were talking about when you would go to a pet shop and you would see that spider or maybe
Yeah.
like a half inch of substrate and things. And when we
Yes.
think about keeping our inverts, whether they are tarantulas, isopods, things that maybe we would class as terrestrial,
Hmm.
they actually, bless you, they for those listening, that was Leah's lovely partner having a
That
sneeze,
was
I
my
think.
partner. Yeah.
Um, so, but actually, even things that are terrestrial, though they may not be obligated burrowers, and that can go for, it's not just about tarantulas.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to give them the option to do that, you'll actually find that their natural behavior is they will burrow at some
They
point
will. Hmm.
somewhere, and doing that. And Petco actually did a really good video of one of his tarantulas where he made like the 6-foot container. Have you seen that one where he makes
No.
enclosure really deep for one of his fossorial tarantulas? It
Oh
may not have
wow.
been 6 foot; it might have been about 4.5 foot, 5 foot, and it burrowed all the way down to the bottom.
Oh my goodness.
And when we think about it, we don't have to do that for our tarantulas. So
No. Yeah.
people that are listening, please do not go out getting. Well, if you can, if you want, um,
Sure. I mean, you can, but
but
you don't
it's about
have
giving
to.
it's about giving them enough. It's about giving them enough opportunity. Hold on,
Mhm.
Leah. I think the door's just knocked. A second.
Sorry?
Oh,
Oh,
it's Dorothy.
hello.
Dorothy was at
Dorothy.
the door. Hello, Dorothy. How are you doing?
Hi. Good. How are you guys?
Yeah, not too bad. We're just chatting dirt, really. Dirt and
Yeah,
substrate and
substrate.
sort of different
I like
bits and
dirt.
bobs. We've got yeah.
Got a few jars of dirt, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
just a few.
yeah. It's
What
part
is
of the hobby, isn't it?
what is your go-to mix for substrate? Like, what do you like to use? Because we were talking about, cocoa fiber and the vermiculite
I
of olden
yeah,
days. Go ahead.
I do not like cocoa fiber. It
No.
molds way too easily. I it's it's not my favorite. I tried a
Mm.
homemade mix and it was okay-ish.
Okay.
I mixed an OMRI certified topsoil with play sand and excavator clay, give it that structure.
Oh.
But it actually molded really bad one day. Like all of a sudden, one of my Armenia enclosures was really bad,
Oh.
and I didn't have any more of my mix on hand. So I quickly went on to Petco and I ordered some Reptisoil actually. And I had
Uh-huh.
never tried it before, but now that I've tried it, I'm like, this is actually kind of amazing. I really um,
Oh, hold one second, Dorothy. You are breaking up a second.
oh,
Well, and she lives in a climate that's completely opposite of mine. So I know she's on the west coast, like the northern west coast.
Oh,
Um,
hold on, Dorothy. Do you want to try talking? I can see you nodding.
you hear me?
Oh, you're a bit robotic.
uh-oh.
Um, so I think what Dorothy's saying is actually really interesting, though, is that maybe sometimes we try to save a buck,
Uh-huh.
and we make our own mixes and doing things, but sometimes off the shelf stuff.
Hmm.
Are you back, Dorothy?
I think so. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, yeah, that's better.
Great.
We're
It's my
just
Wi-Fi.
we were just saying about like how sometimes we can be like, oh, we're going to make a mix, and it's
Hmm.
going to be it's cheap, it's going to be affordable, but then sometimes you can just buy something off the shelf,
Hmm.
and um, and it works.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the people
that's
listening, Dorothy's nodding. Uh,
that is one thing that I love about the jungle mix is because I can use only that and it works just as well as if I mixed it in with something else, you know. So
Yeah, I use Spider Life. I'm still waiting for them to contact me, so they'll sponsor me. But you know, it's not gonna happen
fingers
for some
crossed.
time. Fingers crossed. You can only hope. But I haven't had any issues with Spider Life.
Great.
It's a really good, robust substrate, and it's really malleable in a sense as you can let it dry out, and it's perfect for those arid kind of enclosures, or it holds moisture really well because it's got loads of bits of biologicals that break down and hold the moisture.
Mm.
So it's fascinating. And just before you came on, Dorothy, we were talking about allowing deep
Yeah.
substrate for
Yeah.
our animals. What are your thoughts on that? Are you a proponent of that, or you know?
I I feel like it's really important to assess the needs of your specific animal
Hmm.
because I have a lot of the same species,
Mm.
but each of them exhibit different behaviors. Like I have
Mm,
multiple Salmopoeus erminias, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of them exhibit different behaviors. And so I think it's really important that if your tarantula is, if you've noticed that your tarantula likes to burrow more, you should definitely give them more substrate, even if they're technically an arboreal, because salmos like to make a little dirt curtain, and one of mine
yeah.
really likes to make an opening at the bottom in the corner of the cork bark.
Hmm.
And I've noticed that she really likes to burrow down a little bit, so I gave her a little bit of extra substrate. But one of my other ones, she's always up. She's at the top. She doesn't care about the dirt. She doesn't touch the dirt. Dirt is bad, you know? So I think it's really important that you assess the needs of your specific animal and watch their behaviors.
Yeah.
And like, 'cause even though, you know, I I love that we have the classification of arboreal, terrestrial, fossorial, but I feel like
Yes.
there are more like subcategories than that.
Yeah.
And like
Yeah, I
I
agree.
feel like it's really important to know, you know, your animal. And if you notice something that you need to change in there, definitely, you know, make the changes, make it more comfortable for them so that, you
Mhm.
know, your animal's comfortable, it'll make you more comfortable, and the proper enclosure will prevent a lot of problems, accidents, escapes, all that other good stuff. So I think
And
it's
and
just really important that you know your
it
animal.
it also prevents a lot of that defensive behavior we see as well. So by giving them that
Yeah,
opportunity to burrow, to escape, in a good substrate that holds its shape,
Yeah,
you're going to have a more happy um, tarantula if we're talking about tarantulas. But
absolutely.
it's the same for all other inverts as well. I think sometimes you'll have people, or people will have inverts, sorry, and they may not be that the expensive one, the £300 one and things, and
Hmm.
so they may not get the same sort of level as care and things. But I think it's really important to do that for all of them, to give them all that opportunity to sort of thrive really
Yeah,
within it.
I
What are
agree.
your thoughts, Dorothy, on bioactive?
I personally am a big fan of bioactive, but I wish that I had the patience and the time and the energy and the effort to do it for all of my spiders. Some of them are bioactive, some of them are not. The bioactive enclosures definitely, like, I don't really have a lot of problems with mold or anything else in those enclosures specifically. I mean, I
Mhm.
don't really have a lot of mold problems, but um, once I switched over some of my spiders to bioactive, I realized that it was a lot less maintenance for me. And
Mm.
although it might be more work in the beginning, I feel like it creates a more productive environment for them to not just survive but thrive. So I'm definitely a fan of bioactive, but if someone wants to come do it, I will come pay you to do it.
Yeah.
Come do
Okay,
it for me.
I will get my plane ticket and I will come on over.
Okay.
Have a go. But I think it's definitely, like you said, there is a lot of work at the beginning. But I think the majority of the work is gaining an understanding of how it works. Once you've gained that understanding of how it works, it's actually quite easy, especially if you have your pothos growing, ready to go in, and all the equipment there ready to go. But is the juice worth the squeeze at the beginning? And about getting that understanding, you're not going to have a bioactive with cocoa fiber. It needs
Right.
to be natural. You can mix cocoa fiber into it, and I have seen bioactives with that in it. But you're really going to have to start thinking about like that naturalistic side of things, and what animals can go within the soils to help it go. Like Brian talked about some brilliant stuff on last week's podcast
Mm.
when he was talking about having
The
composting worms
layers.
and the layers
Yeah.
and the different aspects. I might look into doing one enclosure with composting worms in, and
Mm.
see how that goes. I think it would be a really good food source, especially for fossorial tarantulas. There's a big argument at the moment around I know we shouldn't dig out our fossorial tarantulas. We haven't seen them for a long time, though. There becomes a point as a keeper where you're like, oh, I really should.
Yeah.
Tom Moran actually talks about the only time he's ever dropped injured cricket down a tunnel was when he saw that effectively his tarantula was starving but not coming up. But in the wild, they probably wouldn't be starving because they would be eating the animals that are living
Worms.
in the soil that are coming out into their tunnels and
Right.
stuff. So yeah, I think it would be a really interesting thing. However, you're going to want to make sure that the composting worms don't take over.
Yeah. So I have
Effectively,
kind of a question as far as that goes with the bioactive enclosures. Like, would it be smarter maybe to set up an enclosure maybe like 1 or 2 weeks before you actually put your invert into it?
oh, absolutely,
Is
yeah,
that like the
yeah,
recommended?
yeah. What I tend to do
Mm,
is I'll have it set up for a month
okay,
before doing it, or if not, I'll have it really planned out about what I'm going to do.
nice.
Um,
Okay.
the, the internet only see a very small part of what I do. So like the videos I put on, I might make a quick, or it has to be a rehouse because I
Yeah.
had a feather leg that was on cocoa fiber and the S calcetum, and I just wanted to get it into something a bit more natural.
Mm.
I don't know about you, Dorothy. Do you leave it for a couple of weeks before putting something in there? What do you do?
Yeah, I like to set it up and let it hang out for a little bit because obviously, if you're, I mean, a lot of my tarantulas have come to me in ways that aren't exactly traditional. Like a lot of mine were, people weren't comfortable taking care of them, or
Mm.
so some of mine have been kind of last minute. But if you know your tarantula is coming, you can definitely set it up beforehand, especially and when you're rehousing, you obviously a rehouse is probably going to come. Those
Yeah.
ones are easier to predict. So I mean, if you see, you're like, oh, my next rehouse is coming up, and if you keep track of the molts and stuff, like I use an app, you can kind of guesstimate. I mean, obviously, it's not an exact science because you can never really guess when they're
Mhm.
going to molt, but you can definitely have things set up and ready to go. And especially with the bioactive, I think it's really important to make sure that it's well established because you don't want to be reaching in there and fixing the plant because you don't
Mm.
want to stick your hands in there with the spider in there. I mean, you
I have.
can. More props to you. I
Well,
mean, I have to, but I
yeah,
wouldn't
It's not
recommend it.
recommended.
yeah. It's not
Yeah,
recommended, but
yeah,
you can.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is
It
something.
depends how well you know your tarantula. That's like you said, Dorothy. I agree with you on that. Like, how well do you know your spider, and over time you kind of are able to observe those predictable behaviors, or whatever invert it is, because I do also have some assassin bugs and they are also venomous.
I was so close in getting some today.
Oh,
So
they're
close,
amazing.
and I didn't.
Oh.
But anyway. But also another tip, Leah, just on that topic when you're asking about setting it up, something that I found really useful, and it's something so obvious that it's going to sound, oh, that's obvious, Nat. Why are you saying that? I have an alarm that goes off every Friday when I get home from work that tells me to water my plants. So lots of people fail at growing bioactive enclosures with plants in because they forget to water the plants. They're concentrating on maybe the inverts that are in there, and they're not doing it. And you have to be, it's just sort of staying on top of it. And after because I'd lost a couple of enclosures that I was trying to set up, or they've set up and the plants die in it. And it's like, oh, frustrating, because you've spent money on those plants that you're putting in, and you think, oh, well, I can keep a spider alive or a praying mantis, but I can't keep a plant alive. What's that about?
Right.
But you're so focused on looking after the creature that's in there, you're not thinking about the bigger thing. So just to have that little reminder to be like, hey, you need to water your plants. Right. So it goes off, and I go around and water it, and it's not on the same day, because I feed all of my animals on a Saturday or Sunday. So the plant watering's on a Friday, just so it's different. So it's a different task, a different thing to focus on, and you know that it's done it. And since doing that, I've been a lot more successful in keeping them alive.
Wonderful.
But also some of them, they like humidity. So maybe for people that are starting off doing it, just use a pothos, because they're hardy. They're generally good. I have killed one in an enclosure, but
I believe.
Yeah, I know, right, Dorothy?
Simon,
that's impressive.
From the Mantis Garden suggested ivy to me. Is that also another plant that is hardy and ivy?
Absolutely, cool. Yeah. Ivy is a good hardy one, especially if you want like a creeper. If you've got something going up the cork bark or things like that, and there's other creeper plants that are really good as well, which will be good. I'll send you a list of some ones that I found.
I would love that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
What about you, Dorothy? Do you have like a go-to plant for your bioactive enclosures?
I really like pothos, but I also really like Tradescantia. They're kind of like a creeping plant, definitely for the bottom, but they grow really well, especially the pistachio white Tradescantia. It just grows like mad, and it's easy to just trim, propagate, put some more in there, and I like being able to reproduce from my own plants, because one thing that I have to be really careful about, like when you're getting plants for a bioactive enclosure, is to make sure, there's no pesticides, or, like the soil, like where you're sourcing your plants from. That's kind of like what I like to do with my feeders. Like I'll get one thing of feeders, and then I've just taken them and then I've made them reproduce so that I have my own, my own thing going on, so that I don't have to, what's the pesticide? Like, how is this being taken care of? Like, are they using a miticide or anything else? There's a lot of things that you have to be mindful about when you are choosing plants for a bioactive enclosure. So that's why I like things that I can propagate myself from my own plants, and to like just to reproduce on my own instead of relying on outside sources, which I mean, it's really great to, like, I know that there are a lot of people who have like plants that are safe, like that are available. I know the bio dude used to have plants. I don't know if he still does, but I think Josh's Frogs also has plants.
Yeah, Josh's Frogs definitely does. Still doing that. And just very quickly, before we get to the end of the podcast, is so you touched on like pesticides and different sorts of things. So it's very tempting to just go out into the back garden and dig up soil to use within your enclosures. Now, I would strongly advise anyone that's listening to this to do that, unless you are going deep into the wilderness to dig it up. to avoid pesticides. But then also we do have the problem with nematodes when we're thinking about in the tarantula hobby.
Yep.
So you are better off getting it from a tarantula substrate maker or someone within the pet world. However, you can still get bad substrate, so it's just something to be very mindful of when we are thinking about that. And when that sort of goes on to the idea as well of collecting moss and sticks and different things, bark and things from the wild. Lots of people boil it. Do you boil it or cook it in the oven?
Cook it in the oven at
Yeah.
200 degrees
I boil
Fahrenheit,
it
20
and
minutes.
bake it.
Yeah.
Yeah, boil and bake. It's good. You
Mhm.
got to make sure.
Or
And
freeze. I'll freeze things like leaves. Like if I get
Oh,
like
sure.
leaf litter and stuff, I freeze it and then I'll bake it so that,
yeah.
I freeze everything that's on it and then I fry anything that's
Yeah.
left.
I thought I was losing the plot the other year. I collected all the leaves, stuck them all in the freezer, boiled them, and then baked them just to be sure. And it was lovely. But it's definitely a process, but also something we do need to be aware of as well as pollution when doing that. So if you're
Mhm.
going to be collecting that kind of thing for your bioactive substrate, for your soil, for your enclosures, it's about doing it as far away from the road as you possibly can as well.
Yes.
So
It
especially when we're
usually,
collecting leaf litter and things, because it's just going to be better.
I usually only do that for my rescues. I call them my rescues because they're native species to where I live, obviously, but I'll have friends and relatives who will be like, "Hey, I've got this black widow. I don't know what to do with it. Will you come get it?" So usually I'll use like substrate from, here, obviously, or
Yeah.
outside and whatnot. I only use them for my native species.
hmm
So I'm not.
Well,
I
they've
live in
kind of been
a
out.
city, so yeah,
They've been outside, haven't they?
yeah,
They're
yeah.
sort of
Like this girl
doing
here.
that.
This is sorry. This is
What
my
what
little
what have
orb
you got there?
weaver.
Okay.
Yeah, she's just a little juvenile, but I rescued her from a friend's car, and so I actually used a couple of sticks from outside in
Mhm.
her enclosure. That way, she has anchor points and stuff. But yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. No, brilliant. So
sorry.
we no that was I've never really thought about that.
Yeah, well,
We don't really have lots of really cool spiders. Well, we have got cool
yeah,
spiders
you
in the
do. You have
UK.
velvet spiders.
Yeah. Um, but I would just go out and be like, oh, I'm going to rescue it. Um, I think
I
maybe
do.
we're really used to it in the UK as well. Like our spiders all look quite similar. Well, not all of them,
Okay.
but some of them.
Yeah.
So we're coming to the end, and it is the shameless plug section of InvertiCast. We do
Yeah.
like a shameless plug. Usually, it's a time where the hosts get to say about their social medias and different things. And Dorothy, I don't know, would you like to shamelessly plug yourself?
Sure, yeah. Um, well, you can find me on Instagram, Bougie Vecna. I'm also on the TikTok, as the kids say,
The TikTok. Nice.
And my username on TikTok is the Salmo Queen.
The
So
salmon
if you
queen.
want to see any spider or other invert content, I've really been slacking on posting, but I recently rescued a Ceotoda grossa outside of False Widow, and she is so cute. So I need to make a post about her. So if you want to see more about her, you're gonna have to check out my social media. I also make enclosures. So if anyone wants a custom enclosure, they're anywhere from $35 to $45. I try to not charge a lot. I use USPS flat rate shipping. They're super easy. I have assembly videos on my TikTok and on my Instagram if you want to see. They're a really affordable way to have a nice enclosure. And I was really picky. I'm a DIY queen. So if you want an enclosure, let me know. Hit me up on Instagram, TikTok, anything.
And
Or if you
what's the name
find me
of
on
your
Discord,
Instagram again?
Bougie Vecna.
Can you
So
spell
my
that for the
Instagram is Bougie
listeners?
Vecna. Yeah, BOUJEEVECNA. So you
Thank you.
can find me on Instagram, and then TikTok is the Salmo Queen. So yeah, that's my shameless plug, and also bringing it back because I love Amy from Fang Hub by Tarantulas from Fang Hub.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
Dorothy,
Leah.
I do love your
Oh,
enclosures. I gotta say,
yeah. They
I
are.
think
Thanks.
they're spot on. They're
They
spot
are the
on.
bomb. Have you got an Etsy shop as well yet?
No, I do not.
No.
I just
Ooh.
I just do it, I have a Google Doc that people fill out. It's just me, making these enclosures for fun. So but Etsy's not a bad idea.
Yeah, well, it's really nice that you make it custom as well, which I think is
Oh
really
yeah.
important, to people's taste. Leah, have you
Yeah,
got a shameless plug for today?
absolutely. I've got Tarantula on YouTube, Tarantula on TikTok, Instagram. Um, I have a rehousing video coming up of a very spicy Cereopithecus levitum. So stay tuned for that. And that's about all I've got. And of
Nice.
course, Fang Hub tarantulas, eight paws tarantulas. I love these guys. They're all really wonderful. I think there's another one, Daenerys, Mother of Spiders. She's kind of up and coming. She's really, really getting popular. So check that one out as well if you're in the
Oh, I'll have to
US.
check that out.
Yeah.
I'll just
All
check
right,
it
Nat.
out. I can't get it, but I'll just check them out.
Absolutely.
Cool. And yes, I do have a shameless plug as always. So we're going to do an unshameless plug. So first of all, if anyone listened to the Rubber Ducky Isopod episode, it has been edited to make it child friendly. But at the end, you are going to find a brilliant discount code, which is InvertiCast25, and it goes on for the rest of this month, middle of next month, sorry, where you can get up to 25% off of all isopods on their store in the US. So go check them out. You can also get a discount on the Spider Shop in the UK using the discount code Somerset. That is my discount code, and people have been using it, and it's brilliant. So, for those who didn't go to the Invert show today, get over there and go and get yourself some spiders because you need them, and use discount code Somerset to get a really good discount on there. And I am on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I don't know how to use TikTok, but I'm on it. And yeah, go over to my YouTube channel and subscribe. And don't forget for everyone to subscribe to all the presenters on this podcast. It means the world to us to have you guys watching us, listening us. And yeah, thank you all for listening. Oh,
All
there
the
goes
love. Oh,
Dorothy.
she went. Oh no.
She's gone. Thank you all for listening. Thank you, Leah. It was lovely as always.
Yes, you as well, Nat. Thanks so much.
Okay.
It was
Take care.
fun. I love talking about dirt.